In the summer of 2023, I created an alternative structure of music using the Solfeggio frequencies and the metric system. This video is about how I did that. If that sounds interesting to you, including nerding out over some musical math, stick around. The system is called Tonus Veritatis, or true tones in Latin. There are no key signatures or accidental notes. I made the system to be metric, that is 10 tones per octave, rather than the current 12 tones. This means that no currently made Western musical instrument is capable of playing it because the scaling between octaves is different. Even if you retuned a piano to a Solfeggio frequency, it has 12 tones per octave, so it simply wouldn't line up with a 10-tone system. The octaves and the fifths would align, but not the other steps of the scales. I'm probably not the first person to do this, and the way I went about it may not be the only way to accomplish this goal. So what's the point, you may ask? Simply put, modern music in the 12-tone per octave system tuned to concert A4 is 440 Hz can be considered from a certain point of view as wrong or incomplete. I could make an entire other video on the how, why reasons behind this was done. But whether you believe the quote conspiracy that in 1938 the Rockefeller Foundation, along with the Nazi Party's Joseph Goebbels, were able to get the modern musical standardized tuning of A440 through a large PR campaign, or whether it was simply a commercial standardization process to music, that's up to you to decide. The reasons given were to do with the clarity of transmission along an electrical medium, which is perfectly reasonable sounding. Sure. However, the effect this had was to detune all music away from anything of a healing sound. On our current scale, only concert F2 rings at a correct pitch, 174.6 Hz. Even this is half a hertz off to be healing frequency. No other notes align with Solfeggio. The previous tuning standard was, depending on which sources you cite, A4 was anywhere between 416 to 452 Hz. Each region had specific tunings. There is much debate, with the primary focus falling on 432 versus 440 Hz music, but simply there's more to this picture. This topic in depth is outside the scope of this video, but it gives some context as to why I created Tonus Veritatis. Our current system uses just intonation, which is a mathematical principle, sure, but somehow we left out all the Solfeggio tones, save for one. So what are Solfeggio frequencies, and why should I care? Short answer, Solfeggio frequencies have long been studied for their unique properties in connection with mental well-being, alignment to nature, higher planes of spirituality, and in some cases their healing properties. There's any number of health and healing gurus out there using singing bowls, flutes, or wind chimes, which are attuned to these frequencies. Thousands of other online videos have alternative music which is based in these frequencies, but to my knowledge, they're all using the 12-tone system. Want to really get into a rabbit hole? Check out CYMATICS, the visual study of frequencies. The visible patterns the frequencies create when exposed to movable physical medium like sand or magnetic filings. Makes for some amazing reading and watching. So I figured, why not return Solfeggio sounds to mainstream music? Making a musical system isn't too difficult, right? I should probably stop and give a couple basics of music theory here. Say you have a musical note. That note is a frequency, a vibration that travels through matter, air, water, gas, solids, as a pressure change. Whether it's from a piano, guitar, bass drum, a koto, or a didgeridoo, they all emit an audible frequency, which is a sound wave. When we have a note, say current standard tuning of concert A4 at 440 Hz, to get an octave that is the same note repeating but lower or higher in pitch, you have to half or double the frequency. So concert A3 is 220 Hz, concert A5 is 880 Hz. The same principle is applied to the Solfeggio frequencies, and mathematically you get the same notes. This concept applies to radio waves. If you want to transmit at 300 MHz, then for a full wavelength antenna, you'll need approximately a 1 meter long antenna because a wavelength is a meter long. 150 MHz takes a 2 meter long antenna. Inversely, to transmit at 600 MHz takes a half meter long antenna, and so on. Antennas come in full length, half length, quarter. Each frequency is achievable with any antenna type. However, the highest fidelity is achieved with the full length antenna. As you double the frequency, you halve the size of the antenna. Conversely, as you halve the frequency, you double the size of the antenna. Same with music. Double the frequency, you get the next octave up. Half the frequency, you get the next octave down. Here's how it started. I got a list of the known solfeggio frequencies: 174, 285, 396, 417, 528, 639, 741, 852, and 963. Something about this list bothered me. The more I looked into it, I found there were only 6 tones when we rediscovered the knowledge: 396, 417, 528, 639, 741, 852. The 2 lower and 1 higher tones, 174, 285, and 963, were rediscovered or figured out more recently. So what was bothering me about these tones? It's the repeating number patterns and the intervals which are curious. 174, 417, 741, 285, 528, 852, 396, 639, 963. Each of these groups of 3 tones are the same 3 digits, only in a rolling pattern where the numbers shift to the right. So for anyone familiar with the Nikola Tesla made famous 369 equations, you'll see where I'm going already. 3 groups of 3 tones, 9 total. Polymath or numerology math looks like this. And since each of the tones uses the same 3 numbers that simply shift, the pattern for all the 9 tones is bass 3, bass 6, bass 9, in that order when ascending and reverse when descending. I divided these tones up between their circle families. That is, if they were bass 3, they're a circle of 3 tone. Next, I looked at the intervals between the tones. If you have looked into divine numbers or sacred geometry, you will immediately recognize 111 Hz as being one of those numbers you seem to see over and over again, along with 88, 33, and several others. It didn't look like a lot of reason for the interval spacing until I realized the skip patterns. 2 tones with 111 Hz between them, then another number. Just going on 21 and 102 didn't seem to make sense until I tried making 21 into 021, then 102. The next logical step would be 210, again with the digits shifting to the right each time. I started going about this using number squares and figured out something even cooler. If you take a 3x3 grid, think Sudoku or tic-tac-toe. In the top row, fill in 021. In the middle row, 102. In the bottom row, 210. Every single side, even the lower left to top right diagonal, adds up to 3. The upper left to lower right diagonal is 0. That's when I hit a breakthrough. When you add 963 and 210, you get 1173 Hz, which is 999 Hz above 174 Hz. 999 being another sacred type number. But also 9 plus 9 plus 9 equals 27 is 2 plus 7 is 9. This is where the next circles of 9 came from. 1173, 1284, 1395, 1416, 1527, 1638, 1740, 1851, 1962 being the second circle. Again, they all add to 369 in order as the first group of tones does. How interesting, I thought, and kept digging. Remember the 111 Hz difference from the original circle of tones. Subtract 111 from 174 and you get 63 Hz. Besides also adding to 9, 63 is the mean frequency of thunder, according to this study right here. It's a pretty nerdy read, but I'll link it below. I would also like to point out that this paper was presented at the 33rd International Conference on Lightning Protection in 2016, 33 being another sacred number, also adding to 6. Also, the digits 2016 also add to 9. Take that a step further, and when you subtract 33 from 2016 and you get the year 1983 as the first conference year, and when you add 1 plus 9 plus 8 plus 3, you get 21, which is 2 plus 1 is 3 again. Okay, that's not a damn coincidence, I thought. So if you take the lowest solfeggio tone, 174, and subtract 111, you get 63 Hz again, the medium frequency of thunder. If you half that, you get 31.5. Half that again, 15.75. Half that again, you get 7.875 Hz. And that, being 0.03 Hz away from the Schumann resonance, cannot be coincidence either. Neither the fact it's 3 again, or that it's essentially the same pitch, with the Schumann resonance being 7.83 Hz. What's the Schumann resonance, you ask? It's the sound of Earth, the nearly imperceptible electromagnetic hum emitted by the planet. We're also told Schumann's resonance was first recorded as recently as the 1960s, but the theory goes back to the late 19th and early 20th century. Well, where did I go from here? At first, I tried making the solfeggio tones the scale. That is to say, the actual tones were the major scale octaves. But that doesn't work because of the uneven skip tones every third note. I took a small break at this point and looked at something else. I discovered that the circle of 9 tones each added up to 9. What do I mean? If you take the 9 solfeggio tones and add them up, you'll get 4,995 Hz, which in polymath is 4 plus 9 plus 9 plus 5 equals 27, is 2 plus 7 equals 9. If you take the second circle of 9 tones and add them up, you get 13,986, which in polymath is 1 plus 3 plus 9 plus 8 plus 6 equals 27, equals 2 plus 7 is 9. See where I'm going with this? You can take it a step deeper and add each of the circles of 3, 6, 9 together respectively, and you get the same 9 every single time. 174 plus 417 plus 741 equals 1332 is 1332 equals 9. 285, 528, 852 is 1665, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 5 is 18 equals 1 plus 8 is 9. 369 plus 639 plus 936 equals 1998 equals 1 plus 9 plus 9 plus 8 equals 27, which is 2 plus 7 is 9. This continues up the scale into the next circle as well. 417 plus 741 plus 1173 equals 2331, which is 2 plus 3 plus 3 plus 1 equals 9. 528, same thing. 639, same thing. What really blew my mind was adding all the Hertz numbers from all 3 circles of 9 together to get 41,958, which is 4 plus 1 plus 9 plus 5 plus 8 equals 27, which is 2 plus 7 equals 9. So how do I know these are the correct tones? Aside from being 999 Hertz higher than the corresponding circles before it, they all keep to the same principle of 369. Now, add in another complication. Another set of numbers, those being 2, 4, 3. Why 2, 4, 3? 174 to 417 gives you 243 Hertz difference. 417 to 741 gives you 324 Hertz difference. 741 to 1173 gives you 432 Hertz difference. Notice the pattern. Each time the numbers 243 shift to the right, and also 243 equals 9 again. The same thing holds true up through the circles, so this places rotating patterns of numbers inside each other. 369 and 243 work like the gears of a combination lock to get you through the circle of frequencies. Sadly, I didn't investigate this lead of 243 any further, but I moved on to other concepts. Let me explain something else at this point. The commonly accepted range of human hearing stops on the low end at 20 Hertz. Below that, you get infrasound. The interval of 111 Hertz means that if you want some below or subtones in your music with this system, the lowest note you should choose to base your scales on is 138 Hertz, being both a base 3 number and above the cutoff of 131, which when you subtract 111 from that, you get 20 Hertz. Not to say you couldn't use base 6 or base 9, but I've only built the system on base 3 numbers at this point. Now when you take all of these concepts up to this point and start hammering out an idea, it's kind of hard to stop. So here we go into the actual musical system. I used 174 Hertz as the zero and starting point for the system. Double the frequency, you get 348. half the frequency, you get 87. So that's the first 2 octaves. I mentioned it at the beginning, but hadn't really touched on it again. This scale is metric, meaning 10 tones to form a full scale. That is 9 individual notes between 2 octaves, with the octave doubling as the 10th tone. The center note is the 0 tone. Below an octave is the negative 10th. Below 2 octaves is the negative 100th. Below 3 octaves is the negative 1000th. Same thing going up. First octave up is the 10th. Second octave up is the 100th. Third octave up is the 1000th. Now, the system being math based on metric means you don't have to stop there, or even base your notes on 174. But the reason I stopped is that being based from 174, the octave between the 100th and the 1000th pitch, when all circles of tones are used, covers the current musical system concert octaves 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and keeps going. So that seemed good enough. The third note above the 0 is the third. The first note above the first octave up is called the 11th. The fifth note above the second octave up is called the 105th, and so on. Likewise for below. The fourth note below 0 is called negative 6th. The 12th note below the 0 tone is called the negative 18th. The 23rd note below the 0 tone is called the negative 107th. The reason the tone designation numbers were done seemingly backwards is so that mutually matching numbers on either side of the 0 frequency kept their octaves. For example, the negative second pitch of 104.4 is an octave below the second, which is 208.8. If I had counted from 0 exclusively in either direction for the designations also, that would have put the negative first and the first, which are only 25 Hz apart, as having the same tone designation. This would have been more confusing in the long run, so I numbered it always ascending from left to the right. Negative 1000th to negative 100th is concert octave 0. Negative 100th to negative 10th is concert octave 1. Negative 10th to 0 is concert octave 2. 0 to 10th is concert octave 3. 10th to 100th is concert octave 4. 100th to 1000th is concert octaves 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, then keeps going, with concert octave 9 stopping around 15,800 Hz, but Tonus Veritatis, based on 174 as 0, goes to 23,688 Hz at the 1000th octave of the highest tone, that being the top of the third circle of 9. Again, if you base your scales on different tones, you'll get different results. Now, how can you make this for yourself to test? Simple. Start a spreadsheet with a center cell. Enter your starting value. Could be 174 or another base 3 number. To the horizontal right, add 10% each cell, or multiply by 1.1, then 1.2, then 1.3, etc. Refer always to the 0 tone to center your formulas. So likewise for below. To the horizontal left, there's a couple of different ways you can go about this. So the way I did it was I started at the 0 frequency, I counted over 10 cells and I said divide by 2. And then from that cell, I simply added 10% each time. So the cell to the left multiplied by 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, etc. But this is not the only way that you can do this. I'm going to recreate the pattern up here. So by the time we get 10 cells over, we need to be multiplying by 0.5. So that means each cell is 0.05. So when we get to 10, we have 0.5. So we'll take 174, we'll come to the left, we'll tell it that that equals that. We're going to multiply by 0.95. And as you can see, we get 165.3. We come to this cell, we multiply our center cell by 0.90. See, we get the same number again. This cell equals our starting frequency, or 0 tone, multiplied by 0.85. And as you can see, we get the same note again we have down here. So it doesn't matter whether you multiply descending from the right or whether you multiply ascending from the left, as long as you understand that every 10 tones will be an octave. Now, since the beginning of this video, you've been listening to music written in this system, Tonus Veritatis. If you were wondering why the music seemed off a bit, that's why. Your ears aren't used to a 10-step scale system. But if you lean into it somewhat, you'll find some new dimensions of appreciation as your ears become accustomed to it. Here's the catch. With an entirely new system of music, as I mentioned before, nothing currently made or manufactured will play this system because of the 10-tone scale. Every keyboard, piano, guitar, MIDI instrument, brass, woodwind, strings are all based on 12-tone scale. The octaves and the fifths would match, but nothing else. What I've done is to pitch bend separate voices of notes to conform to the hertz required for each pitch. Closest concept is manual MIDI sampling. It's very time consuming. I have maybe a couple percent of the 174 scale for voices sampled at this time, but even with a couple percent you can make music. Another huge topic to cover is pitch combinations. Progressions. Testing a new musical system is ridiculously fun, and Tonus Veritatis has some unusual sound combinations that aren't to be trifled with. If you think a tritone sounds bad, you ever heard of a combination of notes that makes you smell burning wood for a second? Well, I did. My original scale theories were simply odds versus even and Fibonacci sequences. This doesn't always hold true, however. I found combinations of tones that sounded pleasing were fewer than tones which sounded uneasy or distressing in some way. When using 2 or 3 or 4 tones to form a chord, the sound changes a lot, just like the current musical system. As an example, if you take root 0, 174 and play the second above it, which is 208.8 Hz, it sounds minor or dark. However, add the negative sixth below that, which is 139.2 Hz, and it makes a beautiful sounding chord of negative 6, 0, and 2. Now drop that an octave, and oh boy, that's some thick sound. Playing around with the inversions of the chords gives you other results as well. Same with the current musical system. Take the negative 6, 0, 2 chord and switch it around to be negative 2, 0, and 6, and you get a sound which is final and resolved sounding. Take negative 2 plus the fifth, and it sounds like a current power chord. Take 2, 4, and 8, you get a minor sounding chord of even tones. Take 3, 4, 7, you get a danger sound. Going back over my notes on the chord testing showed that taking the negative 10th, the 2nd, 4th, 6th, and 9th sounded awesome in some way. Combining tones 7, 8, 9 gave me a whiff of burning wood. If you take the 9th or negative 9th and add that to the 4th and negative 4th, it's a solid minor sound. So with these concepts discussed, let's talk about natural harmonics for a second. I use a free PC program called Fritcher, which gives you real-time audio analysis of frequency bands in visual reference. The software uses my microphone, which is a JLabs Talk Go. I'm going to play a single tone of 100 Hz from Audacity in what should be a quiet room. Now, if I take 100 Hz and add to that 150 Hz, watch this. These other peaks, besides the 100-150, are the natural harmonics. That is, the other sounds which come out to play in our physical world when 2 or more tones are used. Want to add 3 tones? Go for it. You'll see more harmonics. If you really want to see something interesting, use this tool with your own voice. Sing a sustained note. Our voices are all unique, like fingerprints. Well, the human vocal range encompasses a wide sweep of sounds, but let's say it's possible for humans to talk, sing, squeak, or hum between the same numbers that we can hear. That's roughly 20 Hz to 20,000 Hz. If you count each solid Hz as another possible tone, that's 19,980 factorial, which my PC's calculator simply says overflow, so it's a really big number of possible combinations of sounds for a human voice. When I analyze my own voice print in Fritcher, I see about 20 unique sound bands. How I'm making music in this system is by taking existing concert tones in different voices, piano, strings, vocals, whatever, and raising or lowering them until I have the correct frequencies. Once I get the frequency I want, I simply add or subtract 10% to create the other notes. I've used Audacity for about 20 plus years now. It's a free program you can download which has very powerful audio recording and editing tools built in. I'm not going to show you how to use Audacity because there's literally thousands of how-to videos online for this software. But if you'd like to repeat some of this, go for it. For any other guitar players out there, I recently had to reverse engineer the current musical system for Solfeggio, figuring out the ratios of ascending and descending notes in order to get this next part. I wanted to tune my guitar to 417 Hz rather than 440 Hz. So what does that mean for someone who's not used to musical theory? That means that A4, or the second fret on the G string of a standard guitar, would have to ring at 417, not 440 Hz. To do this, I used octaves of 417. That is, an octave lower is 208.5, lower again is 104.25, and again is 52.125. That means an octave up, or the 14th fret on the G string, 10th fret on the B string, or the 5th fret on the E string, should ring at 834 Hz. Once I had that, I had to figure out the built-in ratios of the current musical 12-tone scale. What I came up with is going up, you add 5.9463%, and coming down you subtract 5.6125%. Once I had that figured out, here's your 417 Hz Solfeggio guitar tunings. Note that mathematically this also lines up with the existing 12-tone system. So what would this look like if this system was made into, say, a keyboard? Simple, only one layer of keys, no accidental sharps flats to be found. You could set the keyboard or piano's center frequency, then all other tones populate at that time. Depending on how many octaves you wanted would determine how big the instrument was. You could also make complex keyboards with multiple tunings possible by segmenting the keyboards or stacking with multiple units to cover broader frequency ranges. I would surmise you could choose where the zero tone populates on the keyboard as well, as this only requires firmware code with synthesizers. For other traditional instruments, changes would be required. I'm not an engineer, but I'm guessing that with guitars or stringed instruments, you would only need to re-engineer the frets or spacers to match a 10-tone scale. Woodwind instruments would have to be redesigned entirely, but they may have fewer keys or buttons overall. Brass instruments should only need adjustments to the tubing lengths, and the musicians would have to learn new fingering patterns. Also, some entirely new instruments could be created for the 10-tone scale. Lastly, let's talk music theory. While the subject of music theory is one I'm quite familiar with and would enjoy discussing, Tonus Veritatis makes this much simpler by losing the circle of fifths entirely. The theory simply comes down to mathematical principles of what sounds good, bad, or different, which is predictable based on the tone designations within the zero frequency range. The musical staff does not need to change at all. You can simply count the spaces and lines as 1 through 10, being based on what your zero frequency is. Need more than one octave? Yeah, no worries, use a grand staff. Basic note names would change to be representative of their durations. Note design would need to change to reflect Roman numerals 1 through 10. I have designed a set of notes based on this principle. The note heads are equivalent Roman numerals in design. The dotted notes only add a half beat, not the half of the note's full value as with the current musical system. As all the whole beats are already covered, the addition of the dot makes any note a half a beat longer only. Key signature goes away entirely. There is no need to indicate sharps or flat notes with Tonus Veritatis, as it doesn't work this way. If a note does not occur within the given scale, it doesn't exist. Want some strange melodic elements? Yeah, no worries. Use 2 separately tuned keyboards. Time signature has to change because metric doesn't work like imperial in this area. To match current 4/4 time, that is 4 beats to a measure, a quarter note gets a beat, Tonus Veritatis would be 4/1 time. Tonus Veritatis gives you much more flexibility when it comes to the number of beats per measure, and just as much flexibility about what equates to a beat. Want 15 beats in a measure? Sure, write your piece in 5/3, or 15/1, or 7.5/2 time. Need a very long measure? No problem. Writing in 10/10 time gives you 100 beats in a measure to work with. Want some outlandish numbers, say 44 beats in a measure? Tonus Veritatis has you covered. You can always use 44 over 1 time, or alternatively, you could use 22 over 2 or 11 over 4 time. Where we have the current system of 8th notes, 16th, 32nd, 64th, and 128th notes, Tonus Veritatis keeps these equivalents but changes the name. D2 is the 8th note equivalent, D4 is the 16th note equivalent, D8 is the 32nd note equivalent, D16 is the 64th note equivalent, and D32 is the 128th note equivalent. The D means note division, and the number is how many divisions of a single beat. If you are using 10 single beats to a measure in Tonus Veritatis, that is 10 over 1 time, the use of D32nd notes would give you 320 notes within a single measure. This would be on par with 64th notes at a 5/4 time scale of the current system. If you need more than 320 notes in a measure, extend the time signature in Tonus Veritatis. Want to write in 6/8 time? Sure, write in 6 over D2 time in Tonus Veritatis. The musical time and clef symbol would need to show 3 pieces of information: time signature, tempo, and 0 frequency. This shape was chosen for its utility and function. This shape could also show more complex pieces, such as multiple 0 frequencies used and the number of octaves of each. Other symbols like the volume indicators, mezzo forte, pianissimo, repeat symbols, rests, codas, they don't need to change as their function is not altered. Here is a very simple melody written in Tonus Veritatis in 4 over 1 time, 110 beats per minute at 174 as a 0 tone. Here is what it sounds like in sine wave. I hope you've enjoyed this look at an alternative musical system. Again, the purpose of this system is to reintroduce to Western music the solfeggio frequencies. Thank you for your attention. Xenia Musica. Out.